Imagine reaching into an old coin jar, maybe one sitting on a shelf in your grandfather's house for decades, and pulling out a small copper coin. It's worn, it's brown, and at first glance it looks like any ordinary old penny. But what if that little cent was actually the last of its kind? Or what if a tiny mistake made at the mint turned it into something far more interesting than it appears? Today, we're going to look at two specific Lincoln wheat pennies, the 1958 and the 1940 AD, and by the end of this video, you're going to want to dig through every jar and drawer you've got. Let's start with the 1958 Lincoln wheat penny, because this is one of those coins that carries a quiet kind of historical weight that most people completely overlook. The year 1958 was the final chapter of the Lincoln wheat penny series. This design had been running since 1909, nearly 50 years, and by 1958, the U.S. Mint was quietly preparing to retire it. The following year, 1959, the reverse of the Lincoln cent would be redesigned to show the Lincoln Memorial, marking the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. So when you hold a 1958 wheat penny, you're actually holding the last generation of a design that defined what an American cent looked like for half a century. That's a meaningful thing, even if the coin itself doesn't shout about it. In 1958, the country was in the late Eisenhower era. The space age was just dawning, the Soviet Sputnik had launched the previous year, and American culture was at this interesting crossroads between post-war confidence and a new kind of uncertainty about the future. Coins being struck at the mint that year were ordinary daily currency, passing through hands at diners, drugstores, and corner shops, completely unaware they were part of the last run of a beloved American design. The 1958 wheat penny, like all Lincoln cents of that era, is a small coin, 19 millimeters in diameter, weighing 3.11 grams. It's made of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, which gives it that warm reddish-brown color when it's seen some circulation. Fresh uncirculated examples will show a bright, almost orange-red luster that's really quite striking. On the obverse, you have the classic Victor David Brenner portrait of Abraham Lincoln, with the date 1958 todo right and the mint mark, if present, just below the date. On the reverse, the famous wheat stalks flank the words 1 cent and United States of America, with e pluribus unum along the top. It's a simple, elegant design. 50 years later it still holds up beautifully. Now here's something interesting about the 1958 penny. The Philadelphia Mint produced around 252 million of these coins, and the Denver Mint, which would carry the mint mark, struck approximately 800 million. Yes, you read that right. Nearly a billion pennies from Denver alone in a single year. Those are enormous numbers. And that's precisely why a circulated 1958 wheat penny in ordinary condition is worth, at most, a few cents above face value. They were made in huge quantities, they circulated widely, and millions of them survived. But, and this is where it gets interesting, not all 1958 cents are created equal. When a coin circulates heavily, it loses its fine details to wear. The high points of Lincoln's portrait, his cheekbones, his hair, flatten out. The wheat stalks on the reverse lose their crispness. A heavily worn 1958 cent might technically be worth about 2 to 5 cents in collector terms. Not exactly exciting. But an uncirculated example, a coin that somehow never left a roll, never saw the inside of a cash register, tells a completely different story. The surfaces are bright, the devices are sharp, and it genuinely looks the way the mint intended it to look the day it was struck. For circulated examples in average condition, you're typically looking at 2 to 15 cents for most 1958 Lincoln wheat pennies. Step up to a nicely uncirculated example graded MS 63 or so, and you might be in the range of $1 or $2. Push into the higher grades, MS 65 red, where the coin retains nearly all of its original mint color, and values start climbing toward $20 to $50 or more, depending on the specific grade and registry. Now, it is where things get genuinely remarkable. The 1958 double D per se. There is a known variety of the 1958 Lincoln cent that collectors have been hunting for decades, and it's one of the most dramatic double die errors in all of American numismatics. The 1958 double die obverse, sometimes written as 1958 DDO, shows strong, visible doubling on the date and lettering of the obverse. On a true example, you can clearly see what appears to be doubled lettering. The inscription "I in God we trust" appears twice, shifted and overlapping. Same with the date. It's not subtle. You don't need a microscope. This doubling is visible to the naked eye on quality examples. How does a double die happen? During the production of working dies, the metal tools used to actually stamp coins, the hub, which is the master design, impresses its image onto the die. In some cases, the die shifts slightly between impressions, meaning the design is recorded twice in slightly different positions. Every coin struck from that die carries the doubling. It is the truly astonishing part about the 1958 DDO. It's extraordinarily rare. Only a small number of confirmed genuine examples are known to exist, and several have been certified by major grading services. The rarity and the dramatic visual impact of this variety combine to make it one of the most valuable wheat penny errors. Authenticated examples have sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Some estimates place the value of a top-grade certified example well above $100,000. Now, and I want to be honest with you here, genuine 1958 double dies are extremely rare. If you think you've found one, the doubling needs to be significant and mechanical looking, not the soft machine doubling or shelfware that creates a superficially similar but far less valuable effect. Genuine double die doubling is crisp, clearly separated, and affects multiple design elements consistently. This is a coin where certification is absolutely worth it. If you have a 1958 Lincoln cent that appears to show strong doubling on the date and the "I in God we trust" inscription, do not clean it, do not handle it without care, and take it to a reputable numismatic service like PCGS or NGC before drawing any conclusions. Now let's travel back 18 years to 1940, and to the Denver Mint specifically, because the 1940 Eddie wheat penny comes from a very different moment in American history, and a fascinating chapter in the Lincoln Cent series. By 1940, the United States was watching the situation in Europe with growing concern. The Second World War had begun the previous year in Europe, though America had not yet entered the conflict. The country was still emerging from the long shadow of the Great Depression, and there was a cautious, determined energy in the air, the sense of a nation finding its footing again while the world around it struggled. The Lincoln cent in 1940 was already a well-established coin. It had been around for over 30 years, and it had become deeply embedded in American daily commerce. The 1940 Eddie specifically was struck at the Denver Mint, indicated by that small de mint mark you'll find on the obverse just below the date. The 1940 Eddie Lincoln cent shares the same physical profile as the 1958 we just discussed, 19 mm, 3.11 grams, 95% copper alloy. The design is identical, Lincoln's portrait on the obverse, with stocks framing the denomination on the reverse. What differs visually is often the toning. A 1940 Eddie cent that spent decades in a collection will often have developed a rich brown or reddish-brown patina. Some collectors love this aged look, others specifically seek out coins that have retained their original red color. For high-grade certification, coins graded red, meaning they still show 95% or more of their original mint color, carry a significant premium over brown or red-brown examples. The Denver Mint struck approximately 81 million 1940 Eddie Lincoln cents. That's a substantial mintage, though considerably smaller than the numbers we were talking about with the 1958 issue. 81 million sounds like a lot, and it is, but decades of circulation, loss, and attrition have reduced the surviving population significantly compared to what was originally produced. This matters when we talk about value. Fewer survivors in excellent condition means the better examples are genuinely scarcer. Condition importance. The same principles apply here. A heavily circulated 1940 Eddie cent, worn flat from years in pocket change, will show little collector premium. Maybe 5 to 15 cents above face value. But step up into the uncirculated range, and especially into the higher grades with original red color, and the story changes considerably. For circulated examples, the 1940 Eddie wheat penny typically ranges from a few cents to perhaps $1 or so, depending on the grade. A nice VF30 or EF40 example with honest wear might fetch around 25 cents to $1 in the collector market. Un circulated examples start to get more interesting. A coin graded MS63 in brown color might be in the $10 to $20 range. Push into MS65 red territory, a coin with original bright luster and virtually no post-mint imperfections, and you're looking at anywhere from $50 to several $100 depending on the specific grade. The very top of the market, gems graded MS66 red or higher with pristine surfaces, can command prices that would genuinely surprise most casual observers. These are coins that have somehow survived 80+ years without a scratch, in their original mint state. They are remarkable objects. Errors and varieties on the 1940 AD. The 1940 descent has its share of interesting varieties, and this is where careful examination can pay off. One of the most discussed is the repunched mint mark variety. In the 1940s, mint marks were added to working dies by hand, using a separate punch. This process was not always clean, sometimes the punch slipped, or the die was punched more than once at slightly different angles or positions. The result is a mint mark that appears to have a shadow, a secondary die peeking out behind or below the primary. Repunched mint marks on 1940 descents are well documented, and the stronger examples, where the secondary die is clearly visible, carry a premium over the normal variety. Not a dramatic premium in lower grades, but enough to be worth knowing about. In higher grades, RPM varieties can represent a meaningful difference in collector interest. There are also varieties related to die cracks and die breaks on 1940 descents, which are exactly what they sound like. The die used to strike the coins developed stress fractures over time, and those fractures appear as raised lines across the coin surface. Some die crack varieties are quite collectible. And of course, any off-center strike on a 1940 descent would be a significant find. Off-center coins happen when a planchet, the blank disc of metal, isn't properly positioned under the die when the coin is struck. The result is a coin where the design is shifted to one side, leaving a crescent of blank metal. The more dramatic the off-center shift, the more valuable the error tends to be, as long as the date and mint mark remain visible. Alright, let's talk about what to actually look for when you're examining your own 1958 or 1940 AD wheat pennies. First, get yourself a decent magnifying glass, at least 5x magnification, or a loupe if you want to be more serious about it. Good lighting matters too. A bright, directional light source will help you see surface details that flat overhead lighting will wash out. Try holding the coin at an angle to the light and rotating it slowly. This technique, called raking light, can reveal doubling in surface details that are invisible in direct overhead light. For the 1958 cent, look closely at the date and the inscription "I Am God We Trust." On a normal example, the lettering will be crisp and single. On a genuine double die, you'll see obvious, separated doubling. Each letter will appear to have a shadow that is itself a fully formed letter. This is distinct from machine doubling, which creates a flat, shelf-like appearance on the edges of the lettering rather than a separate, rounded secondary image. For the 1940 descent, examine the mint mark carefully. It's a small die just below the date, and it should be relatively clean and well defined. If you see what appears to be a second die partially visible, perhaps slightly to the south, north, or at a slight angle, you may have a repunched mint mark variety. Compare your coin to reference images of known 1940 AD RPM varieties, which are available through resources like Variety Vista or the Cherry Pickers Guide. For both coins, look for color consistency across the surface. Uneven color can sometimes indicate cleaning, which damages value. Sharp, clear design elements on the high points, these flatten first with wear. Any unusual raised lines that might indicate die cracks. The strike quality, are the wheat stalks on the reverse clearly defined? And one thing to keep firmly in mind, if you see what looks like doubling, be cautious before getting excited. Genuine double dies are scarce. What you're more likely to encounter is mechanical doubling from die bounce during striking, or just ordinary wear and scratches. Study your coin carefully, compare to verified examples, and if you're genuinely uncertain, a coin club or knowledgeable dealer can help you sort it out. When does it make sense to have a wheat penny certified by a professional grading service? For most common, circulated 1958 or 1940 AD cents in average condition, certification doesn't make economic sense. If a coin is worth $1 or $2, spending $15 to $25 on grading fees doesn't add up. But certification becomes very worthwhile in a few specific situations. If you believe you have a 1958 double die obverse, and especially if the doubling is strong and clearly visible, certification is essentially mandatory. The stakes are too high, and the market for uncertified examples at the premium price levels they command is virtually non-existent. Similarly, if you have a 1940 AD cent that grades in the MS-65 red range or better, certification by PCGS or NGC provides the market credibility to realize the full value of that coin. Dealers and serious collectors at the higher price points want the assurance of a professional grade in a tamper-evident holder. For nice mid-range uncirculated examples, say, MS-63 or MS-64, it's more of a personal judgment call based on current market premiums and your own collecting goals. One of the genuine pleasures of collecting wheat pennies is that they still turn up in the most ordinary places. There are documented stories of collectors buying old estate lots, sometimes just a cardboard box at an auction, and finding unsearched rolls of wheat pennies that haven't been touched since they were wrapped at a bank in the 1950s. Occasionally those rolls contain coins in remarkable condition, completely untouched by circulation. Old coffee cans, glass jars, and shoeboxes full of accumulated cents from the mid-20th century are still out there. Someone's grandparent who simply never spent the pennies that came back as change, stacking them up for decades. These accumulations sometimes contain coins that have sat undisturbed long enough to be quite nice, brown, perhaps, but with full original detail and no wear. The 1940 cents, including the 1940 AD, are sometimes found in such collections in better than expected condition. The 1958 cents, being the last of the wheat series, were specifically saved by collectors at the time who understood their significance, which means some nicely preserved examples have always existed in the market. If you do find a wheat penny in nice condition, and especially if you find something that might be a significant variety or error, please do not clean it. I can't emphasize this enough. Cleaning a coin, even with something as seemingly gentle as soap and water, removes the original surface patina and creates microscopic scratches under magnification. A cleaned coin will be immediately recognized by experienced collectors and dealers, and it carries a significant value penalty. The market distinguishes sharply between original surface coins and cleaned coins, no matter how careful the cleaning process was. If you want to store wheat pennies properly, use acid-free cardboard coin flips, mylar holders, or hard plastic coin capsules designed for coin storage. Keep them away from humidity, direct sunlight, and temperature extremes. If you're storing a larger collection, flat trays in a cool, dry environment work well. For particularly nice individual coin slabs, the rigid plastic holders used by grading services provide excellent long-term protection. You can also find aftermarket coin capsules that fit Lincoln cents and provide similar protection without the grading fee. Let's be straightforward about where the market actually is for these coins. The vast majority of 1958 and 1940 AD Lincoln wheat pennies are common coins in circulated condition worth a modest amount, meaningful in the context of a 1-cent face value, but not retirement funding finds. The pleasure of collecting wheat pennies for most people is the history, the hunt, and the occasional discovery of something genuinely interesting. What makes the wheat cent series so rewarding to explore is exactly this contrast. Most examples are accessible and affordable, which makes them great coins for new collectors, but the series also contains some of the most valuable and dramatic errors in all of American numismatics. The 1955 double die, the 1943 copper cents, the 1922 plain, these are famous coins that began as pennies in ordinary circulation. The 1958 DDO is that same category of story, an error so dramatic that it survived to become one of the most sought-after varieties in the series, found by people who were patient enough and knowledgeable enough to recognize what they were holding.